those of you that are musically inclined, as I am, there's a line that Mozart always said, that music comes because of the white space between notes. Because if you don't have white space between notes, there's no music. So we're going to have white space today, which means that you have time to interact with each other at the tables you're at. And we also have, in the presentations we're making, we want them to be interactive so that as much as possible, we're connecting with each other. Please interrupt, because it's not an interruption, and in fact, it's part of the interactive process. What I'm going to present now is a bit of background on decarbonizing communities. Backwards, forwards, later. Thank you. How Voltage could really work, building on what Aphrodite said, and really driving how partnering can work. And what are we trying to achieve? This is not an unambitious initiative. It is the hope of the university and the partner universities that Voltage will change forever the decarbonization pathway of Concordia and the partner universities and their partners, and Quebec and Montreal and Canada, and in fact, even globally, because we also have an international aspect to Voltage. And our collaboration today, we are setting the stage, but I want to build on the foundation of the seed projects. And one of the things we're going to do after my remarks now is actually have you connect at the tables you're at, where there, as Aphrodite noted, there are people who are seed round project PIs, or co-PIs, or members of their teams, to interact and share what your projects are. We've done a great number of projects. Let's learn from each other what that first round has done for us. But I'm going to give you a bit more about how decarbonization is occurring across the country. In the last 20 years, I've catalyzed around $4 billion worth of clean energy projects. Large wind, large solar, off-grid projects that reduce diesel. And so I'm deeply connected into how projects are actually working on the line. And I want to make sure we fit the research you're doing into that process. So I'm going to talk a bit about how decarbonization is working across the country and what are the dynamics at play. Please to interact about that too. Secondly, what I'm going to talk about is the strategic synergy that the Voltage initiative wants to see between research, communities, and partners, and how that might work and how that might flow into the impact round that we'll give you more information about later today. Karim Zahib, the CEO of Voltage, will be joining us this morning. He's actually with Minister Champagne and Minister Fitzgibbon talking about Voltage and how it moves forward. And finally, we really want to talk about how partnering strategies can work. And what you're going to find is that, apart from my remarks, the presentations that Aphrodite introduced that you'll get later today will give you an illustration how partnering has been working and could work as we move forward. So that's my remarks. 36 different seed projects. I don't know if you've looked at the list of seed projects. I have. And I believe there's incredible potential, remarkable potential in the seed projects to add value. But they're slices in and of themselves. My question, when I asked myself when I looked at the projects, was to say, how in fact can these projects be connected? Where's the clustering? And I know Andreas will be leading a process where we're going to have thematic workshops in the course of the summer to make those connections so that we're tying projects together. Because typically, you see with research and taking projects forward, it's never one piece of research. It's building on existing knowledge, existing innovation with local knowledge, indigenous traditional knowledge, industry knowledge, along with new knowledge and research you bring to the table. And so what we're really feeling with the seed round projects, we expect that when we move into the very open, transparent, competitive, and independently verified process of the impact round, we expect that some seed round projects will be part of that. But what we want to make sure they really are truly impactful. We may approve 10 impact projects, plus or minus. We may approve half a dozen living labs, plus or minus. But every one of them has to change Canada, has to change Concordia, has to change partner universities, and change the country for decarbonization. This is truly aspirational because Voltage is the start. If we do that right, we get incredible leverage to other people coming into the existing initiative. Yesterday afternoon, I was with the folks at Power Corporation who made a contribution to Voltage. Well, they're just the start. If we really show how the research ties into partnering, we then kind of attract that support that really moves to implementation. It's not simply the research, but how it's applied. So we feel that the seed round projects are an incredible accomplishment. And Andres, I want to thank you for your leadership, because if it wasn't for your leadership on this, we wouldn't have got to this. So thank you. But it was you, so thank you. And so now, but let's go further. Now we're going to build on where we are today. First of all, it's going to be really exciting to see as we come, and I know we're going to be reporting, and the Voltage team will be reaching out to you, asking you for impact as to how the seed round projects are being implemented. That's really, really important, not just here, but across the country, including with the partner universities. Because and we'll be having more communications to share. I mean, Aphrodite noted we're a year into Voltage, but I would say to you, we're just starting to hit our stride. We're just getting the team in place, and part of that's going to be really interactive communication. So please reach out. I mean, I would urge you to connect with people like Nicole and others that are here, Chagis and others that are here today, who can help you with knowing what you're doing. You can connect with them. So sorry, it's taken a while, but we're now, I think, over the hump. Now it's a hard downhill run to real accomplishment. I don't know if any of you are aficionados of situation comedies. I am. So one of the ones I watch too much is repeats of The Big Bang Theory. For those of you who watch The Big Bang Theory, you will know that this image here is of a three-dimensional, see someone's nodding, someone else is nodding, a three-dimensional chessboard that Sheldon created. That's what decarbonization is. It's you know how complex a two-dimensional chessboard is. Three-dimensional chessboard or more is infinitely more complicated. And I think we need to appreciate that the pathways of decarbonization are infinitely complicated. It's a big bang. We know from the sciences of the planets and our solar system and the universe, we were in a big bang. I don't think people realize how much of a big bang decarbonization really is. It's undergoing a systemic change that is just the scale of magnitude is staggering to me. I mean, I monitor projects from around the world, and we read about this project or that project, but it's how energy is changing, and the changes are really weird. I mean, the last bullet point there is about climate. Can anyone think what the demand peak for electricity in Canada used to be? What month was it 10 years ago? When did we use the most amount of power 10 years ago? No, July. What is it now? September. Do you know how much of a change that means for the electricity system alone? And that's just one factor. That's just one climatic factor, not an economic factor, not a social factor. A virtual work, how has that changed electricity demand? How does the transfer into heating and cooling evolve? Individual and industry behaviors are changing remarkably. Effectively, in the process being affected by climate, affected by the cost of energy, electricity, and fuels, individuals and businesses are making rapid changes. And they're making changes that we didn't think would happen that fast. People keep saying, for example, that we'll need more electricity, which we will. But you know, in Ontario, do you know when the highest electricity demand was? It was 4 years ago. It's been declining ever since. Now, it'll come up again as we transfer to more heating and cooling and transport being electrified. But there are changes happening here that are much more than a technology switch. It's much, and trade and supply patterns. I mean, I deal with real-world projects. So let's look at a project like in Nain, Labrador, which is in the east coast of Canada. They're doing a project that's going to replace diesel. It's an Inuit community with wind and energy storage. So we need to buy wind turbines and controllers. Does anyone know how long it takes to order a controller for a remote project? 2 to 3 years. It used to be 12 months. Because supply demand has changed. Because everyone's looking at that. I mean, when I was up in Iqaluit last year, the CEO of Aquila Energy, the utility for the region, said to me, "Chris, I got a big problem." I said, "What is that?" He says, "We can't buy enough transformers." He says, "We're too small. We need 100 transformers. I can't get them sometimes for 3 or 4 or 5 years." Supply and demand has changed incredibly. And so and then energy security, both in terms of reliability. You know, 2 weeks ago, I was in Quito, Quito, Ecuador. For 8 hours a day, in every part of the city, there's no power. None. So there's rolling blackouts every day in every part of the city. Why? Climatic factors change the hydrology flow, And so now when they used to have 85% of their power from hydro, now it's only 60%. They haven't replaced the 25%. So now there's rolling blackouts. How would it be? Rolling blackouts in Montreal, that may not be a bad thing. You get 8 hours to do other things, maybe. But look at the consequences of that. So I think understanding decarbonization is not simply one project. There's a lot of coverage of this, saying, oh, we've got this solar here, this wind project here, these EV systems coming on board, this battery technology that's being invested in. It's actually a systemic change that's very profound. And how research fits into that, how voltage projects fit into that, and how they go into real projects, situating this in this big bang of change of decarbonization is key. One of the things that drives me nuts is multi-factor approvals, right? You get something on your phone saying, you can't buy this until you give us this code, and you're going, where's that freaking code? And you're searching for it all year long. But decarbonization is multi-factor dynamics. Things are changing at the same time and different ways and different pushes. And so you almost have to look at that in terms of how the research fits into that. So that actual research actually gets applied in the decarbonization future. It actually gets implemented. It gets used. Because research in and of itself is research. That's not what voltage is about. Voltage is about great research being applied systemically in a scaled basis, replicable basis. That's how we will have the aspirational impact that we have for voltage. And these are just a few of the factors that are at play here. We know that powering heating and transport is, heating, cooling, and transport is really material. That's the biggest demand driver for electrification. So that's 80% more electricity in Montreal. That's in Montreal, which is already electrified most of its heating. In Toronto, it's 130% increase as we go into that process. If you look, for example, at investment conditions, I don't know if those of you are aware, but we have the Inflation Reduction Act in the United States, which puts billions, hundreds of billions of dollars into the clean energy sector. But we also have the investment tax credit situation that was introduced in the budget about a year ago, which is just starting to be implemented. That creates a dramatic incentive for the movement of capital into clean energy projects because the money you put in, you can use that to reduce your taxes later, particularly if you're a business that pays taxes. But that has a huge incentive to move capital. If you look at commodities and markets, let's look at lithium. I don't have a glass of water here, but you can extract lithium from mines, or you can extract it from liquid. And so now, for example, there's major research underway to extract lithium from brine, typically underwater brine in places like Wyoming or Alberta. And so I'll make a prediction to you. In 10 years' time, there won't be any more lithium in mines. It'll be cheaper to extract lithium from underwater aquifers, take the lithium out, put the water back down. So these commodity changes are materials. If you look at critical materials, the question, where will the amount come from? We got a big issue with copper. There just isn't enough supply in the world to do that. And even the services industry, I can tell you right now on the project side, we cannot find enough people to take projects forward. So research that helps move projects more effectively is really, really material. On the demand growth, we've talked about that side. The grid capacity is driving this very, very quickly. I would say to you in provinces like Ontario in particular, it's changing, and also the way it's being procured. So BC Hydro issued a call for proposals for power in April of this year. It'll close in September. They're going to require 3,000 gigawatts worth of power. That's about 15 projects of about 100 to 200 megawatts each. In that call for power, they've also said, though, no one will get a power purchase agreement unless you have a minimum 25% Indigenous ownership of the project, or maybe 50%. So partnerships embedded in the way power is being procured. You've seen the deal on transmission for Hydro-Quebec going south of the border to New York, and you've seen the partners from the Mohawk communities in that space. So you're seeing how the nature of the system is changing, the technology is changing, the demand and supply factors are changing. And so we have to think about how research that's being done through voltage is being material to respond to those change needs. So here's what we see as being strategic synergy for voltage in the seed projects, but particularly in the next round impact projects. First of all, one of the essential requirements for voltage is that equity, diversity, and inclusion is integrated in all facets of the university and of the projects, both in terms of principles and practice. The Voltage team, particularly Tanya and some other people on the team, are now preparing the EDI plan. And I would say to you, for the seed round projects, there will be an expectation, there'll be another workshop likely sometime in the summer, there will be an expectation that you'll be asked, well, how is your project dealing with communities that are marginalized? How are they being included in that? If we don't do that, we will not get more funding for Voltage. That is an essential requirement for the funding agencies. And so you can expect that in the impact round projects, for sure, we want to see that they are enveloped by the commitment to EDI principles and practices. So you may say, for example, and we'll have it profiled in the project descriptions today and the partner presentations on Indigenous communities, but there are others as well. You might say, well, there's a community that's a marginalized community, that's a housing community that needs to decarbonize their buildings and infrastructure. How will that work? But then there's this intersection. I like Venn diagrams. So this is the Venn diagram that will guide the selection of impact projects. At the end of the day, we want to see groundbreaking research in decarbonization that's really bringing from Concordia and partner universities. But that has to be meshed together with intensive and collaborative partnerships that are really co-created and with shared governance. And finally, there really has to be true decarbonization. So it can't be a research project that's sitting on the shelf there. It can't be, well, this is helpful. No, it has to be material in a timeline that we're looking at. So you have to look at how scale moves and how speed moves. As I mentioned, this is a very dynamic energy environment that we're in. So if someone says, okay, we're going to do this research project, and in 2 years' time it'll be published in a peer-reviewed journal, and maybe then in 10 years it can be used. I'll be honest, I'm not sure that'll meet the requirements that we need to see for the impact round projects. There needs to be the speed of moving things forward. And that's one of the reasons why both the living labs are part of this, how we move forward fast. So Voltage wants to see strategic synergy. So, and frankly, you're researchers, most of you. You want to see research used. Well, exactly. That's what we want to see that. So, but doing that in a very real way that's integrated is highly important. Let me stop there for a minute and ask if anyone has questions or you want to challenge what I've said. I really hope someone challenges me. Okay, that's your first notice. Ursula, thank you.
The impact, how do you see the impact projects connecting to the living labs? Because if impact projects also have this community aspects, could we see it as being maybe just one part of a larger living lab project that maybe encompasses different themes and topics, or how do you see that relation?
I'd almost ask the question back to you because I think your living lab leadership is key. I think the more integration, the better. I think so where the more integration between different researchers, different universities, and more communities, and where projects that are impact projects and living labs are connected together. My experience has been at the project level, it's never one thing. It's usually dozens of things that make the project happen. So I think the more integration, the better.
I would agree, and I think that's a process we should be doing over the next few months of identifying basically different cities and communities who are interested to work with us, and probably they have a bunch of interests. They might be interested in sustainable mobility, in governance strategies, in district heating, and so on. So, I don't think we figured it yet out, but I could see if a city commits to work with us, then we could have maybe a few, one or two impact projects, let's say the digital twin project, sort of closely linked to that living lab project of a city. And maybe we have either a complete second impact project, or maybe just a part of an impact project also related to that city. And I think it's it will be a bit of a complex process, but I think if we find these strategic municipal partners, that want to work with us, our community partners, then we can see by what kind of more technological projects or more socioeconomic projects do we have, and how can we bring that all together. And I think the Voltage team will really help to make that happen. Thanks.
Thanks, Urs. That's really great. And I'm going to thank you for those comments. I'm going to ask Nicole and Daniel also to monitor and to send a note to the people virtual. And if they have questions, let us know and we'll bring them into the function here. But I think this actually, your comments are really prescient, Ursula, because it gets to the next thing that I think we really want to emphasize, which is what are the collaborative nature of projects? To me, well, let's look to you. When I talk to researchers, they're very passionate about their research. We're all passionate about the things we're passionate about. But what we need to know is how, in fact, Voltage is prioritizing community decarbonization. Where is the need to go forward? So to my mind, for example, we asked you in the bids in the proposals for the seed round, we asked you for the letters of support for partners. That will not be the case in the impact round. This has to be a co-design process where the partners are saying, here's a solution we need. Here's where we have 5 of the jigsaw puzzle pieces we needed to decarbonize this part of our community or this area. And if we do it here, we can do it in another 10 places. And you're the 6th piece of the puzzle. That's what we want to see. So then scalability and replicability is essential. What we like to see is not a project. There's so many one-off projects. It's kind of crazy, so I'm going to see if the technology will work for me here. Yes, it does. All right. Is it coming up? Yeah. So I don't know if you know, but in Canada, there are Indigenous communities own, co-own, or have a defined financial benefit with almost 21% of Canada's electricity generating infrastructure. 21%. All renewable projects. You can go on this map. It's virtual. Just look at the Indigenous Clean Energy website. This is the organization I founded. These are just the larger projects, the list by region. There are about 300. We'll be putting out our next data report in midsummer. There's about 300 medium to large projects, 1 megawatt to 4,000 megawatts in size. And there's about 3,000 smaller projects, typically, small-scale solar projects that may be half the size of a soccer or a football field. Yeah, put the map up. Yeah, great. Okay, Daniel's going to start the technology for me. I'm seeing it on my screen. I thought you did. My apologies. And so, there you go. And I'm going to go off in a minute, Danielle, so I may need your help on that. So this is an example of scalability. So we're going to be interested if you say, look, here's where a need is in a community. And the communities, by the way, can be defined different ways. We think of communities as being Montreal or Vaudreuil, or people. No, it could be a community of businesses. It could be an industrial park. It could be a sector. So community can be defined differently. There's a diverse array of communities. So we're okay with that. I mean, in fact, you may say, for example, we're dealing with institutions. Hospitals need this for decarbonization. So therefore, we're going to be doing this with them. That's okay. That's good. In fact, we like the idea of diversity of communities. But what we're interested in is that the research may take your research along with the other pieces of a project to apply to this particular, argument's sake, hospital, but then it can be applied to every hospital in the country. That's where research will be really contributory to the scalability and the replicability of decarbonization. Daniel, I got to go back to the main slide, so how should I do that? Daniel? Michelle? Okay. So keep in mind that what we're really looking forward is that community driver, and so this needs to be based on relationship. And that's where we're going to be giving you the time, in fact, to do this. Perfect. There you go. I think we got it. Great. So Kareem will talk later this afternoon, towards the end of the day, how the process will work. We would only expect the seed round impact to be called until the late fall for expressions of interest, and we'll move over the winter, and formal submissions will occur sometime midwinter. So you have time for this. So my advice would be, if you're with a seed round project, or you're a researcher looking to work with others on an impact round project, including with partner universities, which is the relationship building you need to do now? Relationship building is core to this. because that really stipulates how you get that scalability. And that allows you to integrate EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, into the projects. So that, it might be, for example, how people have to be trained, or who will be researchers, who will be faculty, in fact, and decides so we're bringing those marginalized communities into the process. And so community decarbonization is the key thing that Voltage is being supported by the funding agencies to do. So at the end of the day, 6 years from now, we have a suite of impacts that, in my view, have changed this country of decarbonization and interacted that way globally. That's what our goal is. You're going to hear what we're going to do. I'm going to take a break in a minute, grab a coffee, grab a juice, and then I'm going to encourage you to chat at your tables, sharing what you're doing in your project so that you're learning from others, and so that we're having a bit of time, FaceTime with others. And we'll take a good hour for that, because the more we can connect with each other as to where your research is, who you're trying to connect with, what challenges you have, what you don't have, that's going to make the process of getting to the impact of the seed round and impact of the impact round even more impactful. So therefore, how do you do this? This afternoon, you hear from my friends Tommy Palliser and Sarah Lisa Kasudlak. It's been my honor to be, I consider myself a member of the community of Inukjuak, because I've been involved for 16 years with them, because it took us that long to get the project they'll talk about. But it was built on that relationship. I remember when Tommy came to me about more than 16 years ago and saying, we want to do something about clean diesel. What are we going to do? And you need to know us. Having been there a dozen times, I've seen Tommy get older. I've seen me lose my hair. But it's built on that relationship. So we really encourage that the planning for impact round, and in fact how you're implementing the seed round projects, is really involved with early stage partner engagement. Relationships make the difference, and that's why I was really, really glad that we decided to hold this workshop, and there'll be other opportunities through the summer and fall, so that we're meeting each other face to face, and good things happen when people do that. I also really want to talk about knowledge links. I mean, Tommy and I also expect Troy Jerome later today, and potentially Fabien Joly will talk about ITK, or Indigenous Traditional Knowledge, or local knowledge. Research knowledge from the university is one source of knowledge. But what we already know with decarbonization, there's multiple sources of knowledge that come into play to make projects go forward. Industry has great knowledge. I mean, Tommy and Sarah Lisa will talk about how different forms of knowledge and research have come together. So how does this tie to Hydro-Quebec, or Ontario Power Generation, or the municipality of Montreal, or in fact, this particular company has really great technologies? So knowledge links, because with the example of decarbonization, it's typically not one piece of research or one piece of knowledge that allows decarbonization to occur. There's both soft, hard, and technological research and knowledge that fuses together to make decarbonization economically and socially acceptable. And so therefore, in the research you're doing, I'm really curious, when you get into table discussions shortly, if you can discuss how that's happening. What is the nature of research, and how you're using your knowledge along with other knowledge to make decarbonization accelerate? The word governance, it's a bit loaded sometimes, and sometimes this polarized political environment. But I'll say to you, in the map I put up a few minutes ago, most of those projects have equity ownership on the part of Indigenous communities. They own part of the project, so not sometimes all of the project. Therefore, as owners, they share decisions. So I would ask yourself, as researchers, how are you making decisions about how research is done, used, applied with your partners, so that you have the shared basis of decision making? We'll be looking for that, because what that does, it also accelerates the application of research. The evidence is categorical. One of the reasons, I mentioned the BC Hydro example a few minutes ago, one of the reasons that BC Hydro agreed for the first time in Canada ever to make a stipulated provision that every power purchase agreement for a power call has to have Indigenous equity ownership We showed them categorical data that said, if you want to have impact on making projects go faster, make them cheaper, make them more, kick off higher returns, local ownership is absolutely critical. You can't just have impact benefit agreements. That's so 20th century, and we're in the third decade of the 21st century. You can't just have benefits on construction and development. This has to be recognizing that we are in the process of decarbonization. We're also democratizing energy, and we're decentralizing decision making. So therefore, partnering requires a different form of decision making. That in fact, part of what you do or your teams do in research is being shaped by what the partners require, and likewise, you're also needing things from them. You know, I love it when researchers contacted me during the seed round saying, Chris, do you know if there's an Indigenous community that will work with us and send us a letter of support? I said, no. They said, why? I said, wrong question. The question is to say, we have a relationship with an Indigenous community. Here's how we can help them, but here's how the seed round can make that happen. That's a better answer. And when you do that, the resource leverage is significant. I mentioned the investment tax credit. I can also mention there are different, not just the market conditions like the BC Hydro one and soon to be in Ontario, and including now soon you'll see in Quebec. You know, when I sat with Michael Sabia about 3 months ago, he says, we're going to do some of these things too here in Quebec, which is a complete change of where Hydro-Quebec used to be. And that leverages resources because applying research means that other resources have to come into play to put that research into application, investment, infrastructure, actually doing it. So therefore, when you have the right connection with communities and partners, which also include the investment community. I mean, my meeting yesterday with Power Corporation, they asked to meet me. I said, why do you want to meet me? They didn't know I was involved with Voltage. And they said, I can't reveal too much, but they said, we want to invest a lot more in this space. How can we move more and more money into the clean energy space? And I said, you got to look for the right projects with the right partners where there's truly getting great research and knowledge applying. And they're going, okay, thank you very much. I should have charged them, really. You got a freebie on me on that one. We also hope to see that there's high visibility with this. I mean, one of the things we'll do right after lunch, we'll play you a short documentary that Aphrodite and her students produce in collaboration with the community of Inukjuak. And she'll talk more about that because it brings visibility to this. We want to see visibility is that communications piece that really accelerates replicability, scalability, and outcomes. I mean, apart from the tri-camera relationship of research, communities, and decarbonization, we also want to see the tri-camera linkage between climate, social impacts, and economic outcomes, the classic sustainability triad. Are any of you trained as economists? Thomas, are you trained as an economist? Which is the most important part of the sustainability triad? I'm trained as an economist too, so you got to get the question answer right. So let me put it up. It's the social side. The core of economics is social behavior and dynamics. And so therefore, if you're not seeing the benefits of decarbonization research and decarbonization project that has a social benefit, well, it's hard to move forward to get the economic outcomes that are really substantive, let alone the climate outcomes. Indigenous communities today not only own 300 or more medium to large projects, they make around $400 million net after operating costs, investment, and financing costs. That's then used and recycles in the economy. That's very, very powerful. You know, when Sean Atleo was the national chief of the Assembly of First Nations, he always said to me, he says, Chris, you know, Indigenous people don't have a problem with wealth. We like it. It's all about how you made it and how you spend it. And so therefore, that virtuous circle of how decarbonization drives the economic returns for a social benefit is part of the alchemy of having the impact that we want to see. I have one final slide. Any biologists in the room? Okay, I'm not, but let's say one. Thomas. We're going to get you the mic because I want the people online to hear too. And please introduce yourself.
Perrin, Marketing Department, GMSB, and this is a perfect illustration of what I want to say. The argument around climate, social, economic outcomes, there's one element missing, which is the living entity. And the living entity is not just the human, it's about the nature. And it's how we respect nature, and we haven't, because we have a good logic view on everything, even research. So I think the artistic and nature aspect should be part of that element if you really want to ingrain that shift.
I think it's marvelous. Thank you. That's great. That's a wonderful contribution. I couldn't agree more. Thank you. That's great. So with nature, my final remark is we want to create a new DNA of decarbonization, which includes the broader nature that you've talked about. Thank you for that. We all have day-to-day jobs. We have too many things to do, too many emails to deal with, and too many people drawing on our time. But what we are doing is creating a new DNA. We're creating a decarbonization DNA through voltage that what we hope that through the seed projects that many of you are leading, through the impact projects that I hope some of you will be involved with, I'm sure that'll be the case with partners, that the impact is seen to be game shifting. Let me give you a couple of reasons how I think about this. In my companies and my organizations I've led, I've always looked at dramatic change that is completely game shifting. I've talked about Indigenous communities. When I started doing this 25 years ago, not one Indigenous community owned one equity project in clean energy in the country. Not one. But I knew it had to happen because every square inch of land in this country, or what we should call part of Turtle Island, is in fact Indigenous. So we're going to use those resources, wind, solar, hydro. The first people should own a part of that. And in fact, the courts and business have affirmed that. And now we see the results that are there. And we wouldn't be at the level of clean energy if it wasn't for that. And so I've done this several times in different things. When you stay at a hotel, you know they got that silly sign that says, if you want to reuse your, if you're staying for a few days, reuse your towel, hang it up. If not, put it in the bathtub and we'll give you a new towel, right? That's my idea. Back in 1992 or 1989, when we greened the CP hotel chain, and then we greened Doubletree, and then we greened Fairmont, and then Sheraton. All the rules of hotels in the world changed, but it started at one place. It started with CP hotels here in Canada. So that kind of incrementality of change is what we want to see with Potash. It's building a new decarbonization DNA. So we have knowledge application in projects that reflect, and I use the word very intentionally here, enduring. That's to me one of the reasons why living labs is so important. They're living, they continue. They're not one time. You're establishing foundations. These are enduring relationships. You're going to hear from the projects later today that the relationships that are established are not one-off. They're continuing. They're long-term. And so the enduring academic community Indigenous industry relationships is the DNA that we want to build. That's my remarks. Take it or leave it as you will. What we're going to do right now, refresh yourself with coffee or beverages, and then we'll do a little introduction to have table discussions for a lunch break, and then we'll talk about some projects as you get to see how this is working. But I'd also encourage you, share as much as you want. There's no interruption. It's sharing your viewpoints as we go along. Thank you.